Hey yo, what it did, y'all? Let's get right into it. It's been like 2 weeks of Settlers League, which means I think I can give some thoughts about the league overall. Why it feels whelming in a lot of ways, quite frankly. I think just it's a weird way to remember the league at the moment because it's not a bad league. It's a good league, even. It just feels weird. Like something feels off. I feel like I'm still waiting for the hammer to drop. There's just something that feels wrong about the way that this league was handled because the league actually released stable and well designed. Like that's weird. We're going to talk about that a little bit more, but just think about that for a second. This league dropped and just delivered in almost every way off the rip. Which it's not that it's never happened before, but if I feel like if I were to count up my experiences since Synthesis League, we would definitely have a lot more leagues that fall in the bucket of something going horrendously wrong than nothing going wrong. Really, like nothing really went wrong with this league except for what Div Scarab of Plenty oversight and the bismuth tornadoes being a little ridiculous for like people who are in menus. Outside of that, there's nothing like outrageous going on, which has me dubbing this like internally to be like the best mid league we've experienced, just because my emotions on this league are very neutral, at least in terms of like how I feel when I think like emotion about the things that have occurred. But the actual league itself, fantastic, baby. So before I get into talking all that, like, comment, subscribe. It helps me out. We're approaching the 4-digit number. I want to see it. It helps me out a lot. Also, subscribe with the notifications on to know when I am posting. You know the deal. Now, let's go. So, starting with King's March and the Settlers mechanic as a whole, banger. Banger. Like, I did not spend the entire first week playing with it to think that it was horrible. Like, I think it's fantastic. I love it. If I hated it, I wouldn't have done it, right? The system just works. It feels like it belongs. It feels like a way to give you something to do to make you feel like you're not being inefficient by not just putting in the next map all the time. You actually take a moment to not put in the next map, to up your shippers, go put in some more maps in the map device, add some stuff to the disenchanter, etc. Right? Like that felt fantastic. It was a nice breath of air in the loop. It's one of the you very rarely see games implement a forced breath of air, forced air quotes, but like forced breath of air into the game. But this forced breath of air actually worked out pretty nicely. It just again, it's just a way out of the map. The systems worked out very well. There were no like criminal bugs just stopping everything from working or anything like that. The rewards were a little interesting to figure out. I really liked seeing the community band together to research how shipping worked in detail. The understanding that we came to with how value is attached to runes, and the number of shipments you do with the number of crops you send is more attached to the divines. And of course you can get more divines for more plants. Like I've seen shipments of people bringing in literally 10 div at a time. But that was a giga shipment, right? They were doing something else entirely and just got rewarded for doing that other thing on the side. Then you got mappers, which mappers turn out to be incredible value once you finally get that system maxed out. You just had to get it maxed out and get good workers. The whole loop feels pretty good. I would have one complaint about the loop of the system, which is that I think that the gold farming requirements get a little insane. Just a little. I do think the gold tuning though is in the place that it probably belongs. It just doesn't match exactly what we were told, which is I think everybody thought that we were going to get this system as a way to like quote AFK, think like literally like Farmville, where something's occurring overnight while you're sleeping. But if you got your city really running at full ramp, the gold cost gets so high that unless you're doing like very specific strats, such as like some of the T17 farming strats, you just don't have enough gold per hour to say give yourself enough gold after a reasonable play session. Reasonable, like not like ridiculous, like reasonable play session of mapping to actually like leave the game doing its thing for a couple of hours. And so that might be like one of the only real complaints I have with the way that the gold is like tuned. There's other stuff where like the auction house, but we'll get there in a second. Actually, we'll get there now because I think that's everything that like I want to talk about, like the core of the system. We're gonna loop back to rune crafting. I want to talk about the core of how everything flowed first, and then like talk about some of the various endpoints of the system, starting with the currency exchange because that one is not just the like in settlers, but more than likely core, and even more than likely is just a test run of the auction house that they're going to be adding in PoE 2. I love it. It feels great. I don't even care sometimes that I'm taking like a 10, 15, 20% hike on the price that I'm paying for something to just get it done instantly. It is so relieving being able to buy the things that I need instantly. And the only complaint I have about it is that I need more things in it. I have some small complaints about like the UI and whatnot, but those are not really for the scope of this video. But just the complaint that I actually have for this video is that I want more things in there. There are things that are currently excluded from the ability to be used in the auction house because of the bare bones limitations of what can be listed, which is any static item. The idea being is that the item has to have no modifiable properties when it's sellable, right? Like, even like resonators, for example, it is strictly empty 3-socket resonators, for example. Or for fossils, it is just the fossil, right? There is no modification to the fossil. Anything that has any sort of deviation at all in its base values cannot be put in there, as well as some other weird things. 3 very notable examples that I'm going to put here. Forbidden Tomes, because they have an eye level relative to their entry point, which determines the rewards they give, are not available on the currency exchange. Beasts, like the Black Morrigan, Cricket Chimeral, even like the big beasts for the aspect crafts. None of them are available in the system either because they have eye levels and modifiers that change the quality, or I mean, not the quality of the craft, my bad. The strength of the fight that they put up where when you do your craft, that's what they change, and therefore you can't use those in there either. And 3 Uber fragments. This is the most ridiculous one because there are no quantities that change with Uber fragments. And the fact that every other fragment in the game is in the currency exchange except for Uber fragments is fucking absurd. I don't actually have a defense for that one. That one's just absurd. Otherwise, the exchange is great. Maybe adjust the gold ratio on the things that we receive, but like, I'll live. Related to gold though, I do have one other complaint, which is mechanics that are not in maps do not yield gold at all. Sanctum, Heist, Delve, I believe Lab actually does drop some gold, so lucky labbers, I guess. Why those mechanics don't drop gold is a little ridiculous to me. I'm fingers crossed that it just has to do with the fact that that gold is technically more of the league mechanics resource than it is the currency exchanges resource. But I hope that when this goes core, they actually realize that everything in the game needs to drop gold, because I don't actually like being forced to go into maps to get gold when I'm playing my Sanctum farm. Like right now, my Sanctum is a functional character, but like, what if my character was just a ZHP Sanctum farmer? Like, I should be able to get the gold I need to like make trades on the auction house, like from Sanctum. And I think it's just they don't want it to interfere with the with the way that the town actually functions. So I kind of understand, but it's kind of bullshit. You know what I mean? Okay, next endpoint: shipping, mapping, fantastic. Both of them, they provide fantastic rewards. I have one complaint with them, however, and it's tied to rune crafting, which is time runes. Really just runes in general. I can't tell if I think the rune crafting costs are too high or if I think the appearance rate of the bosses that drop the rarer runes is too low. I think either statement is applicable. But it's not like the turbo end of the world. I'm pretty sure my opinion on this will change a little bit more, like say later down the line in the league when I'm in SSF or in a private league trying some stuff out, and maybe there's like a way to actually farm them out quicker, but I could not get them to spawn at a reasonable rate, and the drop rate on those things did not feel fantastic. So I'm not super sold on it, but that's like the one complaint I have. Now to lean into the rune crafting side of that complaint, just generally speaking, I think GDG, you made the same mistake you made in Crucible League. In Crucible League, you had these insanely cool talents attached to the back end of the Crucible trees that were like, oh yeah, your rain of arrows does 300% more damage with bleed. Holy shitballs. Or, all of these other things. You have the ability to do it on uniques, to create really insane like special shield throw characters with Emperor's Vigilance, etc. Right? But you made it too hard to acquire the cool thing. Because for some reason, it feels like you value those cool things at the same level as like a Voices 3. Whereas like, at least Voices 7 exists if you really needed to play around with the power level of Voices. And simulacrums have never been hard to get access to actually farm them out. But like when you look at like the runes for these crafts, if you're in trade right now, like I know one of the things I'm currently farming for now, and I'm like winding down my work on this Hexblast character. I'm starting to farm up currency to make a character that used the Vol skill enchant. Obviously, that's like the cool thing that I immediately gravitated to when I saw it existed, and needing like 35 to 40 div up front just to like pay for the runes. I think that price has come down since I last did the math on it, but like needing that much for my runes up front is very off-putting. Like not many people just have that around sitting around in trade. And except from what I'm hearing, it's not the most friendly process either to generate those runes. I think that rune generation needs a slight adjustment. Slight. Nothing insane, just a slight adjustment. Because everything else is like kind of working fine. But I wanted to highlight that the state of the time rune thing just because putting the really cool thing that the league mechanic can do for character power, the one thing the league mechanic can do for character power behind such a high wall across so many of the cool levels. Like it's not like you had like lesser versions of these crafts or other really cool and insane crafts as options. It's really just that tier that goes hard. And everything else is like normal stats. So, you know, reevaluate, but the options coming from those enchants are insane, by the way. So we're gonna have some fun with that. All right, that's everything about the lead mechanic. And while I could end this video here, I don't really want to split this up into 2 videos. So I am going to talk about the like state of the game outside of just Settlers of Kalguur. Specifically, I want to take a moment to talk about ground loot and T17s. The ground loot will have a side note about the economy, but like, look, talk about ground loot first because it needs to be separated from T17s. I don't want to conflate the idea that T17s drop too much loot with the idea that T17s are bullshit. While it is very easy to conflate the two thoughts together in sentiment, in terms of things that we are unhappy about, we need to bisect those two because the ground loot problem stems a little bit less from 17s giving too much and potentially just from the rest of mapping giving too little. Just in terms of, you know, 17s have old map density. Like when I look back at old footage of this game, footage from when I started playing, like maps just had better density in some cases. Or like even if you go back even further back, like I know people will tell you if you talk to an old enough player, they'll tell you about like Gorge, for example, or original Underground Sea, right? Like some of these maps used to have insane base density, and that's what T17s have. And so like that's a part of the problem. But the other part of the problem is just that the drop rates of things feels like they are kind of low. Especially like div cards don't feel in a fantastic spot. And so the general complaint is that farming ground loot strategies outside of 17s does not feel good because the base number of monsters is just such a large differential. Wow, my bad. Between 16s and 17s. And I do think they should have at least made that more gradual. Like if they want there to be a jump in density in 17s, so be it. But you know, make that jump less noticeable. Because dropping cool ground loot is cool as fuck. Like, who doesn't want to drop good loot? What? I might not like clicking on loot, but I sure as hell like hearing the sound on my filter when something drops and I go, ooh, what's that? Right? So, we need that still. Give us a slight adjustment in that direction. But to make my slight note about the economy, if you're complaining about the state of the economy in this league, I think you just simply have not played the game enough. Whether that be in this league or in previous leagues, just to understand the idea that just because there's one strategy that makes uber money does not mean that everything else is dog shit. And 17s are not pulling off what they were doing last league. Like 17s last league, yeah, you know what? You got me. That was a little ridiculous, the things that they were pulling off in 17s. But like right now, 17s are just stronger mapping in terms of like ground loot strategies. You can still make insane money doing a variety of loot tiled mechanics, whether that be, you know, Expedition has its own specific rewards that are really strong. Legion, Essences has some specific rewards that are really strong. Altar farming is still just kind of insane in 16s, right? With like shrines and whatnot. Like, you get a lot of the like base value of the game and mechanics without needing to go to 17s. And I only need a couple. Like, you don't really get a whole lot of value of doing like harvest in a 17, for example. You just get 8s. You'll be fine. There's a lot of very good farming strategies for economic purposes. It's just one of those things where if you were chasing ground drops, you do feel really pigeonholed into 17s. And I think they can do something to squish that gap a little bit. Do not like annihilate that. As much as I hate T17s, this is not why I hate them. Let's talk about why I hate T17s. I don't like T17s because of the process of getting into them. The rolling of the maps is a little absurd. It feels like you need to the statement that roams around is that 17s are harder than Ubers. And I feel the need to clarify that statement a little bit. It is not that the numerical tuning of a 17 is harder than an Uber. At a base level, before you start scaling up modifier effect and whatnot, the base tuning of a 17 is not harder than an Uber. What is harder than an Uber is getting it to be runnable. There are just a lot of modifiers in there that hard brick builds. You can't gain charges. Your block chance is non-existent. Zero suppressed. You can't suppress any spell damage. Enemies take like 80% reduced critical damage. You know, a giga reduction in AoE if you rely on AoE defensive reservations, right? Etc. There are just a ton of different ways that they completely flatten out your build's efficacy. And the fact that it's, 4 to 6 mods, you can only roll them with Chaos Orbs. So you can't even just use the excess of Aux and Scours that you have to do. And it has to be through Chaos Orbs. Does not feel particularly fantastic. That it does just make it very hard to get yourself into the map that you want to do. I will say the Scarecrow Bisection being added does help a lot with getting the initial run of a 17 down. That's a good feeling thing. I wish it was a little bit more common, but like whatever. On a related note, that I'll talk about bisection, I should talk about the other side of things, which is modifier effect. If you are complaining about how hard a map is when you are scaling modifier effect on a 17, get your head checked. Straight up, get your head checked. You are actively opting into making the content harder and then complaining that the content is too hard. You get what I mean? Like, if you were dodging modifier effect and just trying to run them without it, I understand your complaint, right? I understand complaining that some of the non-scaled quantities are a little bullshit. Like complaining about the way that Elder Tentacle Fiends work with people with abilities to leave them off screen. Like, I understand that. I completely get that. But if you're complaining to me about the fact that the modifiers become absolutely absurd when you've stacked over almost 90% modifier effect on the map, you opted into that problem. It's like complaining about your life recovery rate being turned off in regular mapping at 90% effect. Like, you opted into that problem. Does upscaling modifier effect present a lot of problems for a lot of builds? Yes, but that is an opt-in problem, and I don't think that the devs should be held accountable for players trying to opt into more and more powerful things. Like, that's a difficulty level that you choose for yourself. It's kind of akin to like if you play WoW and you're familiar with like Mythic Plus, it's kind of akin to like complaining about the tuning of Mythic Plus when you start running keys that are well over the loot maximum. Like, at that point, you're just pushing yourself for fun. That is the point. You start running Delve beyond a certain point, and like, that's the point. Like, it is supposed to scale infinitely. It is supposed to be hard as shit. It is supposed to test your build, and you get rewarded accordingly. So like, that's well designed in that frontier. That covers like a lot of my thoughts about 17s. I understand the baseline problem. I very much get it. But like, let's stop complaining about juiced 17s. Like, if you have problems with the base rolling process, I will say though, one really important complaint about juicing 17s or regular 17s, regex limitations need to be expanded. We need to be able to put more things in the search bar, just so that the idea of having to have one, like having 2 or even in some cases 3 separate regexes is ridiculous. It was like one of my least favorite things about selling 17s in some worlds is like you would have to like actually like go through multiple regexes just to like that sucks. So outside of that, I think the big problem, that's like the biggest thing with 17s that I think like is worth addressing. Otherwise, you know, the rest of my thoughts on 17s are in my other video where I say I want my intro level to bossing content, my like medium level bossing content back, etc. All that good stuff. Anyways, this has been a long video with a lot of thoughts, and I haven't even gotten to the most important set of thoughts, but that's fine because I actually wanted to make that a separate video anyways, so that one will be coming. But just know that the most important thing about this league is that this league is fun, and there's a lot of build diversity in it. A lot. Not necessarily more than previous leagues, but different build diversity, and in a way that didn't kill off other builds. And I'll talk about that at a later date. I want to formulate more thoughts that with the full video worth of time to talk about that, I can really get into some really cool stuff about what build diversity is looking like. Overall, this has been a fantastic league. I'm having a lot of fun outside of, you know, Despairing and Sanctum because I need more money always. If speaking of, you know, if you want to see me Despair and Sanctum live or ask me questions about anything, have a conversation, come and hang out. There's a Discord and a Twitch in the description down below. I just stream in the evenings, not every evening, but a lot of evenings. I do stream on Twitch, as well as I'm pretty accessible on the Discord. Like, it's not hard to get a hold of me there. So if you want to come and hang out and chat, whatever it may be, those links are down in the description down below. Thank you guys for watching. Let me know some of you guys' thoughts about the league. Let me know. Maybe you think I'm way off base with any of my takes. Hey, look, let me know. Maybe you agree. Let me know. All that good stuff. Thank you guys for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Peace.